Reviewing assignment 5. So this is the second half of activity 3.4, making thematic connections. This assignment asks you to look at the poem. So setting a purpose for reading. As you read the poem, underline words and phrases that identify what the author is not. Circle unknown words and phrases. Try to determine the meaning of words by using context clues, word parts, or a dictionary. That's always the best practice. Next, Spring will provide you some information about the author. I think it's always important to read this so that you get a bigger picture, an understanding of who the author was, and it puts the text into context. So this author was a German Protestant pastor. During World War II, he opposed Hitler's religious policies and was sent to concentration camps. He survived, and after the war, he joined the World Peace Movement. This poem is his response to the question, how could it happen? So already you get an idea perhaps of where the author is coming from. You understand maybe his perspective on this topic, on the subject, just by reading that about the author. So it's always a good idea to make sure that you read all the information that you're given. So if we look at the poem and remember that we are looking to identify what the author is not. When the Nazis came for the communists, I remained silent. I was not a communist, so he is not a communist. When they locked up the Social Democrats, I remained silent. I was not a Social Democrat, so he is not a Social Democrat. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out. I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I did not speak out. I was not a Jew. So he is not a Jew. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak out. So looking at this text, we know that it's in stanzas. We can clearly see that there are 5 stanzas. So there are 5 stanzas, and looking at quick glance, we can notice that the first 4 stanzas are all very similar. They all have 3 lines, but when we look at the 5th stanza, it's different. It only has 2 lines. If we talk about repetition, let's have a look and see where repetition occurs. This first line in stanza 1 starts with, when the Nazis came. If we look at the second stanza, it says, when they. Who is they? Right, this pronoun. If we refer back to the first stanza, it identifies the Nazis. So one could infer that they is referring to the Nazis. Stanza 3 begins when they came. Stanza 4 begins when they came. Stanza 5 also begins when they came. So there's lots of repetition. The second line of the first stanza says, I remain silent. The second line of the second stanza says, I remain silent. The second line of the third stanza looks slightly different. It says, I did not speak out. So although the words are different, it's saying the same thing. So I did not speak out, and it repeats again. I did not speak out. And if we look at the 5th stanza, it talks about speaking out as well. So there's definitely this sense of repetition that's happening. So why might repetition occur? Why do authors use repetition? If something is repeated over and over and over and over again, it emphasizes it. Perhaps it's important. They want you to remember it. They want you to see it. They want you to understand it. They give it to you again and again and again and again. Continuing to look for repetition. Now, if we look at that third line, it talks about, I was not. I was not. I was not. I was not. And then we've already identified there's a shift in each stanza. It's identifying a different group of people, and each time he wasn't. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak out, and that's how the poem ends. If we look at the second read, you have those text-dependent questions. So you are only asked to answer question 5. How does each stanza contribute to its developing sense of doom? So if we go back to the poem, It starts off with the communists, and then they're gone. Then it goes to the Social Democrats. That group is now taken away. Then it comes for the trade unionists, and that group is taken away. Then it comes for the Jews, and they're taken away. So bit by bit by bit, society is getting smaller. They're taking piece by piece by piece by piece away, until finally, the poet is left. He's all by himself. Society is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It's decreasing and decreasing and decreasing until it's just him. The stanzas build a sense of doom as they describe each successive group being taken away. Next, you are asked to look at the activities in Common Lit. So you had some text-dependent questions here as well. Directions. For the following questions, choose the best answer or respond in complete sentences. Question 1, Part A. Which of the following best describes the message of the quote? So here in Common Lit, they're calling the poem a quote. A. People should define themselves by their similarities, not by their differences. B. Fear can cause people to stop caring about others or their suffering. C. People should speak out when they see injustice, or they may risk experiencing it themselves. D. Staying silent while witnessing a crime is the same thing as committing a crime. So let's go back to the question and really understand it. It talks about the message. So we also call this in language arts the theme. So we also call this the theme, the message about life, a life lesson. So from any particular piece of text, sometimes texts have more than one theme, more than one lesson, but we should be able to take the lesson and apply it to our lives, even though we're not faced in the same situations. For example, we're not in Nazi Germany during World War II, but what can we take from this text, what lesson, and apply it to our lives? If we go back to the poem and we have a look, it comes at the end and it talks about there was no one left to speak out. So he talked about, well, I'm not a communist, they're different than me. I'm not a social democrat, they're different from me. I don't belong to the trade union. They're different from me. I'm not Jewish. They're different from me. But then when it came to him, there was nobody left. There was no one left to speak out. You're all on your own. So is that right? Should we segregate ourselves and we should only be listed in groups? But when that happens, there's this idea that there's nobody left. So the correct answer would be A. The message is people should define themselves by their similarities and not by their differences. For example, we're all human. We all deserve the same human rights. We all deserve to be able to function daily together. Question 2 is Part B. So which of the following best supports the answer to Part A? A, first they came for the socialists. B, because I was not a trade unionist. C, I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. D, then they came for me and there was nobody left to speak for me. So we covered this already, talking about, look at the very end, because they've all been segregated, they've all been separated, nobody's joined in a united front to save each other. There's no one left. Question 3. What does the phrase, because I was not, emphasize about the speaker? And this is really interesting because it ties back to Springboard and it asks you to look at, identify what the author was not. So what does the phrase, because I was not, emphasize about the speaker? A, the speaker is lonely and distanced from the rest of society, which is why he did not speak out. B, the speaker is deeply sorry and wants to justify why he did not speak out against the arrests. C, the speaker regrets not speaking out because he was not being targeted and ignored those who were. D, the speaker is a selfish, prejudiced person who did not care about the suffering of other people. C is the correct answer. So the speaker regrets not speaking out because he was not targeted. This was his reason consistently. First they came for these people, but I remained silent. I didn't speak up for them because it wasn't my problem. It wasn't my problem, it wasn't my problem, it wasn't my problem, until it was my problem. They came for me, and now there's nobody left to speak for me. I didn't speak for anybody else. Therefore, now there's nobody left to speak for me. So it's a sense of regret. Maybe I could have done something. Maybe I could have stopped it. Maybe if we all band together, they couldn't have taken each group. We would be united. So now this question goes back to the idea of repetition. How does repetition used in the text contribute to its overall meaning? When we mark the text originally, we looked for all the ways that there is repetition. The purple shows repetition at the beginning of each line of each stanza. The blue shows that that second line is similar. So stanza 1 and 2, it's repeated. Stanza 3 and 4, it's a little bit different, but it has the same idea. The phrase speak out is repeated 3 times. It's repeated in stanza 3, in stanza 4, and in stanza 5. So there's lots of repetition. We've already talked about the fact that he kept saying, I was not, I was not, I was not. Answers will vary, but this is the general idea. Students should discuss how repetition is used to establish a cycle or a pattern to show the speakers multiple failed opportunities to speak out against injustice. The first 3 lines follow the same formula. The unnamed they, the pronouns, which we discussed, and we said that that would be the Nazis, came for a group, and then the speaker acknowledges that he did not speak out against this because he was not a member of the targeted groups. The last line changes slightly because they purposefully come for the speaker, and like before, no one speaks out. This cycle suggests that certain groups are continually targeted in history, especially in authoritarian states. This cycle continues until someone speaks up and challenges the pattern. The repetition also suggests that one is not safe simply because they do not belong to a targeted group. Eventually, they will be targeted themselves. So this idea of the repetition shows that it happens continuously, over and over and over and over and over and over again. It just looks different. Now we come for this person, now we come for this person, now we're coming for this person, and now we're coming from this person.